Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Authors Up, your favorite place to be on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad that you are taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on Sunday evenings, and we promise to have a very compelling program for you tonight with a very inspirational author. And we're just looking forward to it and looking forward to having her share her story tonight. Look who's here. Ruth Griffin.
Hi.
Hey, Ruth.
Hi, Andrea.
How are you this evening, Ruth?
I am well. I am well. How are you doing?
I
Thank
am
you.
doing I am doing just fine, just fine. We're missing our queen tonight. Queenie is not here. She's with her cousin, and if you are praying folks and want to send some prayers up, I am sure that Victoria and her family will be happy to have them.
Yes.
Life happens and things happen, and sometimes there are things that have to do with us, and sometimes there are things where we got to help other people out. So,
Yep.
so Victoria is on a helping somebody else out mission tonight, and we're praying for her and praying for her family member as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started tonight, and we're going to start with our week in review. And We're gonna start with you, Ruth. We
Okay, cool. Like there's not a whole lot of
have
options,
a
but that's
crowd
right.
of people with, but you're first in line tonight.
All right. Well, I think last week I shared that my baby's having a baby, my
Yep,
youngest.
yep.
That's right. So uh I'm having a granddaughter.
Oh, we know it's a
Yay.
girl.
Yay,
Good, good,
nephew.
good, good.
Yeah, so she is my daughter has never been the talkative type. It's just that side of that side of the family, my husband's side, they're just quiet people. And a lot has changed in the maternity world from the time when I was pregnant.
Oh yeah.
And I remember having to wait until the 20th week to get my first and only ultrasound, and then maybe being able to find out the sex of the child. So I was asking her questions, and she was like, "Oh no, I have one with every visit, and it's a girl." I'm like, "Maybe you could have volunteered that information to your mother." So I'm working
Times
with
have
her.
changed. Times have changed.
Yes, they have. So we're excited. I was talking with her husband, her mother-in-law today. We're going to start scheduling planning out the baby shower. So I'm happy. So
All the
yeah,
fun stuff. All the
yeah.
fun stuff.
So at this point, yeah, I'm on baby patrol until next year. So next March. Yeah, that's all I'm going to be talking about.
That's it.
So that's
No
it.
problem.
So
No problem.
how was your week?
My week, last week was filled with, well, one part of my what's been going on with me for a while now is going to be taken care of on Tuesday. This Tuesday I will get a new bathroom installed,
Okay.
which I am looking forward to. I've had water issues in the house for a while, and finally got somebody to come out and take a look at it. So I will have a brand spanking new bathroom.
Nice.
I'm excited about that. Sometimes I think about our weeks in review. Guys, we don't always have deep stuff going on. We
You know what? Sometimes it's the little things that make us happy.
it's just daily life stuff. As they say, life be life, and things
Yeah.
happen. And I was really, my other issue is basement flooding. Not
Mhm,
terrible, but enough.
mhm.
And so that's going to be taken care of this month. So I'm not looking forward to any storms or any more rain or anything like that. But you know what? I had to be mindful of something, because I saw a post on Facebook of a former pastor. And he was asking for prayer for his puppy, for his
Oh.
dad. And it was just so sweet. But they had just a surge of water come in, and I was, not really complaining, but concerned about my little bit of flooding, enough to
Yeah.
make me have to get a wet vac and try to soak up all the water and all. And he had taken pictures of his dad's home, which had a water line 4 feet,
Wow.
and just it through the entire house. But his dad was outside sitting on the back of his truck like he was having a tailgating party, playing the bongos and just worshiping God. And a couple of people from the neighborhood had drifted by. And I mean, he was just full of joy,
Mhm.
just full of joy. And I thought, I've got one room and he's got his entire house. I mean, the water line was throughout his entire house. And yet he had a smile on his face and
Mhm.
he was singing praises to the Lord. And it just, I just thought, wow, what a God we serve. What
Mhm.
a God we serve. So I was reflecting on that at the end of the weekend. And there's Miss Victoria. Thank you, Victoria. I'm glad you could pop on. We talked about you already, but thank you for being here. So that's pretty much the way my weekend has been going. Got a lot of things coming up, as you know, Ruth. Authors Up is planning. We're in planning mode and planning phase, and we got lots of good things coming up for 2025. And I'm not going to tell you about them now because, we like to save stuff for later. So we're going to save it and tell you about it later. Um,
Okay.
that's all I got from my weekend review. But you've got a little something to tell us about our guest tonight.
Absolutely. So our guest tonight is Mia Hanks, and she's originally from a small rural town in Missouri. She graduated from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and she has two adult children. Mia shares her home with a rescue dog. Bridemaid, a memoir, is her first book. So we're going to cut to a break, and once we're back, we're going to greet our author. And we're back. Welcome, Mia. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mia.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your memoir?
Yeah, so my memoir is called Bridemaid, and it kind of it kind of came to life in an interesting way. I was in an abusive marriage, narcissistic abuse, for 29 years, and when I was uh, preparing to leave that marriage and learning about narcissism and just figuring out what had happened to me, I spent a lot of time researching and reading, and I wanted to learn as much about narcissism and in my case, covert narcissism as I could. But everything I found out there tended to be written by therapists and psychologists. And it was great information, but it was very academic. And so what I was seeking was something that was maybe told from an insider point of view. I kind
Mhm.
of wanted to know what day-to-day life was like with a narcissist so I could compare my situation, but I couldn't find anything like that. So after I went through my divorce and did a bit of healing, I decided to just write a memoir in hopes that, it might help other people going through similar situations.
Wow. And we're gonna talk about some of the information and your experiences that are in the book, but how was it writing all that? Because I mean, even with a 29-year span to the marriage, you're still not that far removed from the situation. So how was that writing experience for you?
It was interesting when I decided to do this project. I think the biggest hurdle I had right off the bat was trying to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
and trying to take those walls down. Because living in the situation I had been living in, I learned to surround myself with pretty thick walls. So to be able to take down those walls and show some vulnerability to connect with the audience, that was the hardest thing for me, to to really open up. It's scary, and you just at the time I worried. I thought on the surface, this feels embarrassing. It feels embarrassing to have to admit that I lived this way, that I put up with these things that I put up with. But the greater picture is there are a lot of people out there in these same situations, and they need to hear this. So ultimately, I had to learn how to basically be vulnerable.
Now, do you still is that still a work in progress for you, the vulnerability, but also, how you feel about it? Is it still a point of shame or embarrassment that you were in that marriage for 29 years?
Yeah, I think it's not something that victims really talk about a lot. People
Mhm.
talk about the gaslighting and the mind games and the psychological abuse, but there is a facet to it that is just it's embarrassment. So yeah, I think still, I mean, I've worked through a lot of that, but I think as humans, we want people to think we have it all together and that our
Mhm.
life is just going great and everything's great. So there is an element of embarrassment to have to admit to people, yeah, I don't have it all together, and really my life hasn't been that great. I've struggled. I think it's embarrassing to admit you struggle for some people.
Yeah, that is true. And you know what? Honestly, I think we all have our own experiences. We all have something that we've been through. And, even, for some of the stuff that I've shared on the show, with mental health, that too is an embarrassment. So I
Yeah.
feel like you hit it on the head when you say, as human beings, we don't want to admit that we are in the situation we're in because we want to show that side of us that, hey, we're okay.
Yeah.
But it takes work to get, to that place. And sometimes we are just not okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
right.
okay to share that. So I have to say, reading through your story, um, it brought out a lot of emotion um, in me. I was able to feel for you, was able to feel, you know, through the situation, what you were going through. But also there was a lot of anger towards the ex-husband.
Yeah.
It was, I think that that is a testament, not just to your story, but, to your writing as well. Um, were you a writer before this?
I was not. I, took some English in college,
Mhm.
and that was probably the extent of my writing experience. Um, so no, I had not really written anything. So it was a leap of faith. I thought I don't know if I can do this, but I thought I'll give it a try and just see where it goes, and if it can help even just a few people, really it was worth it to me. I just hate to think of other people out there spending decades like I did
Yeah.
in these situations. So definitely, it was a leap of faith. Yeah.
Awesome. What made you choose the title?
The title is kind of a play on words.
Mhm.
Um, Bridemaid. I was married very young, and really throughout my marriage, I was sort of molded and shaped into the bride that my now ex-husband wanted me to be. So I did feel like I was a bride that was being made and molded and sort of crafted into what his ideal was.
Mhm. Do you think that this has sworn you off of marriage?
I'm not sure. You
Okay.
know, I definitely it makes me cautious for sure.
Right.
Um, Very cautious, very skeptical. I tend to not trust people like I used to. I think I went into my marriage very naive. I had grown up in somewhat of an idyllic childhood, really, and had just never been around people that were like this, you know, that had motives that weren't good. So, coming from a place where I was so naive, this has made me definitely less trusting and more cautious.
Okay. How has the reception been for your book so far?
So far, so good. I mean, I've gotten some really good feedback, and a lot of people that have read it have been in these types of situations and felt like, they were able to gain something from it. And, hopefully it's been helpful. I'm hoping that it helps victims feel validated. I think as victims, I know myself, trapped or feeling trapped in that marriage, I was almost looking for someone to give me permission to leave.
Mhm.
And it sounds strange, but I think people out there sometimes they're looking for permission. And maybe this book can give those people that permission they need to take the first step to exit that relationship.
Absolutely. So would you say now then that this is part of your mission in life? This book will be your tool to help others um, in life. In
Yeah, definitely. I've really enjoyed and I found it therapeutic, to feel
Mhm.
like even though I went through this bad stuff, it if to try to turn that around and use it to help someone else, it's therapeutic to me. Um, so definitely, I want to continue to spread awareness about this. It's really just only recently being talked about,
Mhm.
narcissistic
Right.
abuse. 10 years ago, nobody had ever heard of it.
Right.
And, I think that was part of the problem. If you can't put a name to what you're experiencing, you tend to want to think that it's not really happening. It's not really a problem. It doesn't have
Mhm.
a title. So I think, there needs to be more education around this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andre, what you got?
Well, I got a lot of stuff.
Good.
But one of the things that always sticks out to me with things like this is, and as you were talking, Mia, about the embarrassment of it, and just really sometimes why people are reluctant to come forward. I I always find that it is so difficult uh, to be believed in these kinds of situations, that people will be experiencing. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, since you've written the book, what are a couple of the most frequently asked questions about this whole issue surrounding narcissistic behavior? Um, and I think I already know what a couple of them are, but I
Yeah.
wanted to find out from you, what are the most frequently asked questions?
I think the most frequently asked question is that's easy because it's asked so much, which is why did you stay for 29 years?
Yeah.
I think that people who are not in these types of situations find that baffling. And you did bring up an interesting point about being believed. Um, my ex-husband was a covert narcissist, meaning that he was controlling, manipulating, abusive behind closed doors. Out in public, he was charming and he was kind and generous and he was the all-around father of the year, husband of the year. And as in my victim role, I admit that I helped him preserve his image. I helped him, you know, make people think that he was this great guy. And I think that kind of goes back to the embarrassment. You don't want people to think that, things aren't okay. So you mentioned the believability. It is hard then to turn around and say 29 years later, hey, well, you thought he was this great guy, but really he's abusive. People just don't believe you. And it's partially my fault because I was helping him keep this mask in place. So the believability, yeah, definitely. I think all of our mutual friends, we didn't have a lot of friends, but the mutual friends that we had, they all side with him. They just cannot believe that if it was that bad, why did you stay for 29 years? So yeah, that's definitely the question that people want to know.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like once you and you can say whether or not this was your scenario, but so many times that if you do go forward, because that is a lot of times the second question sometimes is why didn't you leave, and the other is why didn't you get some help, why didn't you tell somebody, and you've
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about the embarrassment of it and those kinds of things. But once you get up the nerve to tell the story and it is not believed, how it seems to me that you would then have a feeling of really being trapped. And I'm looking at the picture of the cage
Yes.
that's on your book, that you just get to a point of why tell, why bother, because nobody's going to believe me anyway. Did you have those feelings of just being trapped and just thinking that there really was no way out?
I felt trapped primarily because I had been in this marriage for so long, and the deeper in you get, the harder it is to dig your way out. So for that reason, I felt trapped. But as far as sharing my story or telling anybody what was happening, the only people that knew what was going on were my parents. So when I left, even the point at which I moved out, none of our mutual friends or mutual acquaintances knew that I had even left. So no one found out anything until, I had officially moved out. And at that point, um, yeah, I definitely felt a betrayal. People just, it was sort of like, yeah, why bother? Why bother telling them? Because nobody's going to believe this. And 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 quite honestly, he got to those people before I could anyway. As a true narcissist, the minute he realizes that I'm leaving and his world is imploding, he's got to protect his image. So he goes out to all of our mutual friends and acquaintances and starts telling his side of the story. And at that point, yeah, and everybody's believing him. And you just say, well, what's the point? And it was hard. You think you feel betrayed, but on the flip side, I had to let those people go. I mean, they he can have them. It's okay. It's hurtful, but it's kind of the least of my worries at that point. I had this divorce ahead of me, and yeah, it was whether or not I was believed by friends. Kind of was. It felt like more people should be in my corner, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? Uh, so you touched a little bit on how these types of stories have not been out there. Instead uh, we are shown stories of women who do come forward, who aren't believed. Specifically, I'm thinking of a particular hearings for a particular Supreme Court judge who the accuser came forward and, for the most part, they played it up and then dismissed her. So how did any of that, and because we see a lot of it in the news,
Yeah.
did any of that make you second guess either your decision to leave or your decision to write the book, to share your story? And what would you say to, to people who are just like, hey, how does that make you feel, to be honest?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I wasn't affected by it, by those types of stories, because ultimately I had to leave and I had to get out for my own well-being, my own health. I was really experiencing some health issues due to the chronic stress that I was living under. And so the whole believability factor and seeing stories, in the media where the victim isn't believed, it definitely it happens. But I think on the forefront of my mind was I physically can't survive this stress anymore. So it didn't, you know, who was going to believe me or who wasn't going to believe me didn't really factor into that initial, I have to get out,
Sure.
or I just can't survive this.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is, you feel betrayed when people don't believe you. It's definitely a feeling of betrayal.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you too, because one of the things that we say all the time is everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, and it just depends on whether or not they want to tell it. When it gets to be memoirs, um, it's not just your story, because it affects whomever your life has touched, and what has gone on with you. So my question is, when you made the decision, and I also wanted to know, um, who was your greatest supporter in this? If you had someone who actually kind of pushed you and nudged you forward and said, "Yeah, this is the right thing to do." But I'm gonna put that over here on my left side. On the right
Okay.
side, I want to know, your children are grown now. You've got adult children, but how did they feel about you coming forward? Because, like you said, it's bad enough to endure it, to have to endure it, but when nobody knows, and all of a sudden this book hits the shelves, it's going to take some people totally by surprise. Some people may say, "Oh, I suspected that something was going on," and there are a lot of things that happen with that. But how? What was the initial reaction or response to the fact that, okay, I need to do this because it's going to help other people? How did your children or family members, of who, how did they feel about putting the story out there, about not being able to subscribe to what goes on in this house stays in this house, and all those other cliches and things that we
Yeah.
are raised with?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, how it would be received by my kids. But interestingly enough, they were both very supportive of it right from the first idea that I had to write. They were very supportive, and it's interesting. My daughter has read the book. My son hasn't, but he knows a lot about it. We've had so many discussions, but I think it was interesting for my daughter because there were definitely stories in there that she never knew happened. So yeah, it gave her gave her a bit of an insight into, wow, this is unbelievable. But she didn't doubt it for a second because she experienced a lot, herself too. So yeah, my both my parents and my kids were very supportive of the idea to write the book and to put my story out there. And in fact, my daughter, she's given copies to lots of people she knows, and she's kind of helping me, promote my story and get it out there. So I was very glad that they were so supportive of the idea.
That's good. That is good. There are two things that I would like for you to go over with our listeners tonight. Um, One is the explanation of gaslighting, which is a term I've heard before.
Mhm.
Um, and the other is breadcrumbing,
Yeah.
which was not a term I had heard before. So, can you explain those two to our listeners?
Yeah. So gaslighting, you do hear that a lot now. It's kind of become this popular term. And, most of the time that you hear the phrase gaslighting, the word gaslighting, it's not being used correctly. So gaslighting is where the abuser will effectively change the narrative. So, for example, if I would say to my ex-husband when I was married, if I had said, what you said to me really was hurtful, he would turn that around instead of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," because narcissists are never sorry. He would turn that around and say, "Well, you're too sensitive, and there must be something wrong with you because no one else would have that response to what I said." And then he would say, "And you blow everything out of proportion." And so then what happens is you start to second guess yourself and say, "Well, maybe it is me. Maybe I am the crazy one. Maybe there is something wrong with me." And it's a real effective tool that narcissists use to spin things from when they do something wrong, turning it around to making it look like you're losing your mind. And you really do start to feel like maybe I'm going crazy. So that is gaslighting. Breadcrumbing is interesting, and it's that can be any type of abuser could use breadcrumbing, and that's where they kind of push that victim to the limit, just not quite over the line, and then they start throwing these proverbial breadcrumbs where they'll be nice. They might get you a gift. They might take you to a nice dinner. Just a nice little gesture. So then you say, well, I don't know. I mean, he was pretty nice today, and so I'll hang in there because today was good, and maybe tomorrow will be good. And it's just these little breadcrumbs that they throw at you to kind of keep you present and to keep you there. Because if they were just being abusive all the time, of course, no one would stay. So yeah, it's a very manipulative tactic that abusers will use.
Let me ask you too. What is Tell us a little bit about. I know there was a section that you had in there about the unhealthy relationship, and a lot of us have heard those red flag things about unhealthy relationships. But what I hadn't heard much about was trauma bond. Trauma bond. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And within that, tell us a little bit about something that you call coercive control.
Yeah, so trauma bonding, another word for trauma bonding is Stockholm syndrome, if you've heard of that. And it's just, again, it's very psychological, very manipulative. But the abuser, you reach a point in this relationship, and I know I did this, where you should be angry at how this person's treating you. But instead, you make excuses for them. You want to protect them, and to an outsider that's not living in this craziness, they think, well, that just sounds nuts. But it's a very easy trap to fall into. So, I would find to myself, my parents witnessed a lot of things that made them very uncomfortable. And they would bring up to me many times over the years, hey, are you sure this is okay? And my response 100% of the time was to defend him. I would defend him. I would say, oh, he has this really stressful job and it's really not that bad. And I just, continually wanted to protect his image. And that's what you would call a trauma bond. Yeah. And then coercive control is, again, manipulative. It's sort of narcissists will use guilt a lot. So they're
Yeah.
not forcing you to do something you don't want to do, but they'll guilt you into it. So you are being, in effect, forced, but it's a coercively, you are being controlled. So you're not, physically being forced, but mentally being forced. And that's kind of coercive control. You just feel like you feel obligated. You feel like well, I don't want to make any waves, so I'm just going to play along with him. And so you are doing things out of your own free will, but not really.
Hmm. Hmm. Is this when I hear trauma bond, it kind of reminds me, and you can, put me on the right track here, but it kind of reminds me of, I think they call it Stockholm syndrome,
Yes, the exact same thing.
where you are, where you really begin to believe the abuser to the point that you more concerned about protecting them, and
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that they're absolutely right. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I was 100% guilty of that. You just, and some of that goes back to you do want to paint this picture that your life is good, that everything's good. But it runs even deeper than that, because you feel some sort of obligation to that abuser, you know, because constantly, my ex-husband would tell me, I'm so great and you should be so proud that you're married to me. I take such good care of you, and you should just you're so lucky to have me. And they get in your head, and you think, well, I guess, maybe I am supposed to be more grateful than I feel like I should be. Um,
Mm.
so you have that obligation. I have to protect him. I have to defend him, and make sure that nobody sees how he really is.
Hmm. And I think that becomes easier, I think, as time goes on, depending on how adept they are at the manipulation,
It
at making
does.
you think that, this is your fault. And also when you attempt to tell somebody, or even think about telling somebody, and they come up with a narrative of how lucky you are,
Yeah,
what a great marriage you have, and what a wonderful spouse you have because of the material things and the breadcrumbs. uh you
that's
know
exactly, that was my experience. He would buy me expensive gifts, and say, look what I got for you, and I'm so great, and you should be so thankful. Um, and when you're hearing this day in and day out, it really does become, as I describe in my book, protecting his image kind of became like my job. I felt like it was basically he was my career. And it becomes a way of life, and you start to normalize it. And that's when I think it really gets dangerous, when you start normalizing abuse. Um,
Mhm.
and that's what happens to victims. They just, and you sort of just throw up your hands and say, this is how it is. This is how I live. And I try to convince myself, well, everybody lives like this. This is normal, because we all want to feel like we're normal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You said, Mia, you had said before we came on air that there was a particular quote in the book that you wanted to bring to light.
Yeah. Um, so I put this quote in my book. I found this. It's actually by Stephen King, and
Hmm.
if I understand it correctly, I believe he said this in an interview that he gave. And as we talked about earlier, I think the most frequent question I get is, how could you stay in this type of marriage for 29 years? And I really feel like this quote is the best answer. So I'll share it, and maybe it will resonate with someone. So here it is. There's a phrase, the elephant in the living room, which purports to describe what it's like to live with a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser. People outside such relationships will sometimes ask, how could you let such a business go on for so many years? Didn't you see the elephant in the living room? And it's so hard for anyone living in a more normal situation to understand the answer that comes closest to the truth. I'm sorry, but it was there when I moved in. I didn't know it was an elephant. I thought it was part of the furniture. There
Hmm.
comes an aha moment for some folks, the lucky ones, when they suddenly recognize the difference. The part of that quote that really stuck out to me was when it says, I thought it was part of the furniture. And I think we do, we come into these relationships, as I was, very naive, and you just think it is what it is. That's just how it is, and it's normal, and we normalize it, and we stay and we stay and we stay because, this is how it's supposed to be. So, yeah, I think it's hard to recognize when you get a few years into this. It becomes hard to recognize that it is abuse.
Mhm. There was another quote that you had in there. I'm not sure where it came from, and I didn't write it down fully, but it said the only thing more unthinkable than leaving was staying.
Yeah,
The only thing more impossible than staying was leaving.
yeah,
Didn't want to destroy anything or anybody. I just wanted to slip quietly out the back door without causing any fuss or consequences. And I think that
yeah.
is
I think that was definitely where I was. I just wanted to disappear, and I just didn't want to think about the drama that was going to ensue. I think that deterred me for a lot of years, just thinking I don't think I can deal with the drama,
yeah,
of what would be coming my way, if I really did this. And I think a lot of victims, there's a lot of reasons why people stay, but yeah, I think they feel like it's the lesser of two evils sometimes.
absolutely. Well, Mia, I tell you what, my hat's off to you because this takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
It takes a
Thank you.
lot of courage, and I applaud you um, for sharing your story and sharing it in such a compelling way. And it I'm just going to get right to it. As Victoria says, week after week, get the book. Just playing around, folks. Just get the book. It is a story that you want to read, not necessarily from a standpoint of empathy or sympathy, but one of awareness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because while you may not be going through this, you may see and recognize the signs that someone you know is going through this, and you may be able to help them just by having a listening ear that may give them the courage enough not to stay, not to stay. Mia, how can anybody get in touch with you?
I have a website now. Recently, just got it up and running. It's miajhanks.com, and you can find me there. I have links to purchase the book. I have links to listen to other podcast interviews I've done, and just some general information. Also, I'm on TikTok. My handle on TikTok is at NPD, meaning narcissistic personality disorder, at NPD and me. And you can find me there. I post usually 2 or 3 posts a day, just raising awareness about narcissism.
All right, all right. And is there anything in particular that you want to tell our listeners and our viewers um, before we shut it down for the evening? And
Yeah.
it may be something that will help somebody in a similar situation. What would you like to leave? What would you like for their takeaway to be tonight?
I always like to kind of do a shout out to people who are in this situation with an abuser, with narcissists. Um, Please know that you're not stuck. I think too many people think that they're stuck and that they can't get out. I know it looks daunting, and I know it looks impossible, but you never are stuck. There is a path out, and there are resources out there, and there is help available. So I would just encourage anybody, if you're in this situation and you think you're going to stay because you think it might get better down the road, um, with a narcissist, it's not going to get better. So I would just encourage people to start planning your exit, because you'll find a much better life on the other side of abuse.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so, so much, just for your courage and for writing your heart. It had to be a difficult road because it's reliving again.
Yeah.
It's reliving what you have been through, and that's not an easy place to be in. As authors, Ruth and I definitely understand. We
For sure.
definitely understand. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing your memoir. You can reach her miajhanks.com or TikTok at NPD and me. I think I got that right.
You did.
And last but not least, get the book. How'd I do, Victoria? I hope I did good. I said, get the book. And Ruth, you have some final words for us tonight.
Absolutely. So, Mia, again, I just want to echo what Andrea said is just thank you for sharing your story. As much as we appreciate it, there's someone out there who will resonate with what you've said and their lives will be changed as well.
Absolutely.
So, but for everyone else, we do thank you for listening. And we want to invite you, if you have any questions, if you have curious how to get on the show, you can email us at authorsup@gmail.com. You follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just look for Authors Up Show. We will be replaying this show on Facebook this coming Saturday at 7 p.m. So you can tune back in. You can share that. Otherwise, if you're not a Facebook fan, you can also watch it on YouTube, or you can download our podcast. Both will be uploaded by Wednesday of this week. So that's it.
That is it. That is it. That is it for us for tonight. We thank all of you who have joined us on for revelation and information on an issue that is more timely and more necessary than sometimes we would like to admit. Tough topic, but handled very deftly and very skillfully by a first-time writer
Yes.
who is, I hope, going to be a second-time writer at some point in time. Mia, you did an amazing job
Yes.
Thank you.
in putting your story out there, and thank you so much. And that's it for us. That's it for us for tonight. As Ruth said, we will be this is where we are on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. and we hope this is where you will be too. Put us on your calendar. Make sure that you got your alarm going, whatever you need to do so that you don't forget 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. We never, ever, ever know exactly what's going to happen, but I tell you what, we've got some great authors coming, some amazing books that they're going to be talking about, and we want you to be a part of it. So be sure to join us next week at 7 p.m. right here, ALH Broadcasting, and come on back and enjoy Authors Up. Thanks again, Mia. Thank you,
Thank
Ruth.
you.
Mhm.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.